different accusations flying against different actors.
In an effort to resuscitate his career, he engaged with the Catholic Church. He lived in a monastery with Franciscan Capuchin friars in order to better understand the late Saint Padre Pio, who LaBeouf portrays in an upcoming movie. And this is a conversion story. It certainly sounds like one. He talked about having a gun on the table at the depths of his despair. Again, largely self-inflicted. He's contemplating suicide. He said, I was going to be out of here. But that engagement with the church has seemingly changed Shia LaBeouf. Listen to this recent commentary he gave on suffering.
And when I look at Christ on the cross, I think, is that a joyful man? As he bleeds out and dies on a cross for humanity, is that man joyful? And I think the answer is yes, that even in his suffering, that's what Christ represents for me, meaningful suffering. You know, the story of Christ is that God became man for our betterment. So that means that he is the ultimate example, the supreme priest, the ultimate redeemer. If I look at Christ on the cross, I think that's very instructive. You don't see a lot of smiley face Christs on the cross. You don't see Christ on the cross dying and laughing with aplomb, in joy, in ultimate joy. But I think they should make some Christs on the cross in ultimate serenity, in ultimate joy. They always make Christ like this sad face. And that seems stupid. It seems like it's not deep enough. Like the artists who manufacture those crucifixes, it's almost like they're not seeing the full story. And the full story, I believe, is that Christ is in maximum joy in that moment. He is fully in his purpose. And that's, if you can tap into how you can use your suffering to help other people, that is maximum joy. I always thought joy was, I get this and then I'm happy, or I do this and then I'm happy, or I get her and then I'm happy, or I make that and then I'm happy, or they respect me and then I'm happy. Or I always thought happiness was to be acquired by the things I would gain from life. That's why I was always grabbing. If I knew early on that happiness actually is in me offering all of my suffering up for other people as an instructive thing, or as something that could benefit man, then I maybe would have lived my life differently.
Setting aside the, making crucifixes and changing the countenance of Christ's face and so forth, that's pretty thoughtful. And you're talking about, somebody who is of Hollywood, of all places. If Shia LaBeouf can be reached, then there's always hope. As Pastor Vody Beckham is wont to say, God throws you, just when you think it's lost, God throws you a life preserver. Dead men don't grab. Dead men don't grab a life preserver. And maybe, hopefully, that's an indication that Shia LaBeouf has grabbed the life preserver. For more on this and other topics, including school choice, please be joined again by our friend Rusty Reno, who's the editor at First Things, firstthings.com. Rusty, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, great to be on the show.
What do you think of what Shia LaBeouf had to say?
Beautiful sentiments.
I think so, too.
Sort of gets right to the heart of our faith.
That the phrase that he used, which really, to me, was the setting aside some of the other stuff, is somebody who has seen now meaningful suffering. And you have a great knowledge in this area. I mean, just unpack meaningful suffering from your perspective.
Well, I think he said it quite well. I mean, the old line from your grandma, offer up your suffering, for others. I mean, he's basically saying the same thing, that in our suffering we can pray for others. We can serve others. We can dedicate our suffering to God to help others. And really, charity is the great balm for grief and suffering.
All right. And by the way, he credits Mel Gibson for helping lead him to the church, but it's just a story that won't get talked about in very many circles, so I didn't want to let it go without commentary. In switching gears to school choice, we just celebrated School Choice Week, National School Choice Week. We should be celebrating it every day.
Should be living it.
Yeah, and we should be living it, and a lot of states are. And you write, Rusty, recently that school choice promotes national unity. That will come as heresy to the teachers' unions, but explain yourself, because certainly there's divided opinion on the issue.
Well, in the old days, people thought of the common school experience as a great unifying force, and perhaps in my childhood it did serve that function. But as the country has become more divided on, and not just divided on tax policy, but on really fundamental questions about what it means to be human. Really, the transgender debate touches on the most fundamental questions about what it means to be human. And I think that in that environment, we're just going to wind up being at each other's throats at every school board meeting. And so the first step towards peace is to stop fighting. And so we need to disengage and have a system where like-minded folks can organize and provide education, the kind of education they want for their kids, and then not so we're not tearing each other apart over this issue.
Well, why is
like
school
federalism?
Yeah,
Federalism at a local level. Federalism is the idea that why should Washington D.C. decide how everybody lives in all 50 states, and similarly, why should the school district decide how the bureaucrats in the school district decide how every child is educated?
Well, why do you think school choice is itself a divisive issue?
Jesus says, "Where your treasure is, there is your heart also." I think an even deeper truth is, where your children are, there is your heart also. We care really, really deeply about the future of our children. It's, for most of us, it's the most passionate, most fervent worldly commitment we have. Our faith is greater, but in natural worldly terms, that's often the most powerful emotion that parents feel. So it's natural that we would have very intense battles over education. And again, my thesis is disengagement.
So this
is the first step.
This is sort of a Benedict option argument.
But it goes both ways. I mean, the progressive parent, more power to you. You can organize the schools around these progressive dogmas, but other folks in our society should be able to educate their children in their own convictions and beliefs.
I mean, I agree with that statement, but there's a pragmatic problem, and the pragmatic problem is that 90% of K through 12 students are in government schools that essentially are practitioners of that progressivism you're describing, and a lot of them can't leave.
Well, that's the beauty of the legislation in Arizona, now in Iowa. I think it'll probably come to pass in Texas and Florida. These are huge states, a lot of people. This empowers parents to be able to actually make a meaningful choice. $7,000 and up per child. It's going to take a couple of years for it to phase in for everyone. Initially, it's means tested so that the least advantaged families are the first ones to get the choice, which is, I think, the way it should be. This is also an incentive for, it creates resources for local organizations, local individuals and families to come together to establish new schools. I think that's also good for our country. Local initiative is it's the incubator of democracy. Local initiative. It's the place where we learn how to be citizens and to work with our neighbors to try to do something together. So I think that's another sense in which it can promote unity.
Right, and
the left will say it's divisive, but that's because they want to be able to control the whole system.
Right, and this speaks to the argument you routinely get from the teachers union. We've been hearing it in Chicago for as long as I've been on the planet, which is basically the argument is we can't do anything until we can improve the situation for everyone. And the reality is that we're not here to preserve a system. We're here to educate children. And as a parent, you're here to educate your child, make sure that child gets an education. And so we need to think a bit about this not as a system, but as a lifeboat. And we need to get as many kids on those lifeboats as we can, as quickly as we can, and just keep at it.
School choice brings the parents into the process. It engages the parent because you're not sending your children by default. You actually have to be engaged. And many parents are dysfunctional and they won't be engaged, and that's a bad thing. But if we could increase the number of parents who are engaged, just by even a small percent, that's a gain. That means that those kids who are going to the schools that their parents actually choose are much more likely to succeed in schooling, because parental involvement and student success are very closely correlated.
And it's also something. Go ahead.
The teachers unions. Well, what about the people left behind? And again, I'm all for resources to try to help those who are coming from very difficult situations. But the current system drags everybody down.
Yeah.
And so people like me who have the resources can opt out with my kids, and send them to religious schools or private education. But it's the parent who doesn't have the resources, the means, doesn't have that spare $10,000 a year or $7,000 a year. This is where this kind of legislation really empowers parents, and I think I just don't see any argument against that aside from protecting the system.
Right. And this is something because of what has been afoot for the better part of the last 30 years and is now increasing in pace, I would argue. This is something that we should have the bullhorns on full blast on, because this is an idea that's taking hold. I mean, good grief, it's even taken hold in Illinois. We have the Opportunity Scholarship Program, tax credit program. People should donate to Empower Illinois to help. If you've got your kids squared away, then help some other kid. And there's a process to do that, even in a lost state like Illinois. So, the time is now, so to speak.
And I do think that it's often easy for us to be very down, because it feels like the progressive cultural jihad is just ongoing and it steamrolls everything. But we need to say, well, wait a minute, this is something, as you pointed out, we have been arguing for 30 years, and it is coming to pass. We live in a very paradoxical time. Things are bad on many fronts, but on other fronts, we're seeing the implementation of things that we had hoped for a long, long time, and I think school choice is one of them. I do think that it's just similar to the overturning of Roe. Yes, places like Minnesota just passed this really extreme anti-life bill on abortion. So that's obviously very bad. But there are other states that are protecting life now in a way that was not possible before. The same thing is going to happen with school choice. Certain states are going to really go in for this, but that's good. That means there might be millions and millions of kids who benefit from this movement in the coming decade, even if it doesn't come to pass in California or New York or Illinois.
He is Rusty Reno. He's the editor at First Things, firstthings.com. Rusty, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Great to be on the show. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson here. And if you're a small business owner or make the marketing or advertising decisions for your business, then listen up.
Our annual Food for the Poor campaign is underway, and this year we're helping to raise money for children and their families in Latin America and the Caribbean who are desperate for access to food.
Millions of people, including many children, are suffering because of food insecurity. They simply don't know where they will find their next meal.
Here's how your business can be part of the solution. Become a Food for the Poor business benefactor. Just make a $2,500 tax-deductible donation to Food for the Poor, and AM 560 will give you 40 one-minute commercials to air right here on AM 560 The Answer between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday through Friday at no additional cost to you.
And through the generosity of your business, you'll be helping to feed more than 70 children for a year.
To take advantage of this deal, just call Anjanette Natkowski at 847-472-8951 or go to 560theanswer.com/foodforthepoor.
If I could be you.
And you could be me.
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org.